I'm Dr. Ceecee Britten-Jones from the University of Melbourne. So we're very excited about this project. In this project, we're aiming to improve the diagnosis of rarer inherited macular dystrophies from the more common age-related macular degeneration. So there are two main types of macular diseases. There's your rarer macular dystrophies and the more common age-related macular degeneration. Now the two conditions have very different genetic basis, and this means that they have very different risks to family members, and they also need different treatments. Now historically, these two conditions can often be misdiagnosed. So more commonly, these rarer diseases might be misdiagnosed as the more common age-related macular degeneration. And that's because for a lot of macular diseases, the symptoms are the same, and sometimes the clinical signs of what the clinician sees in the back of the eye can look very similar as well. Historically, a misdiagnosis hasn't been a huge problem because there were no treatments for a lot of these rarer macular diseases or the later stage sort of atrophic age-related macular degeneration. But now what we do know is that there are new treatments emerging for both conditions, and because they have different risks to family members and also require different treatments, it's really important for us to be able to diagnose these two conditions correctly. And so that's really the main contribution we're hoping to make to the Macular Disease Knowledge Bank in our project. We're hoping to be able to understand what clinical signs we can use to better diagnose both rarer macular dystrophies as well from the more common age-related macular degeneration. So currently what we know is that we don't really know how prevalent these rarer macular dystrophies are within the community, because a lot of cases are diagnosed as the most common macular degeneration. So in this project, when we're going to use genetic testing to finalize the diagnosis of hopefully some of these macular dystrophies and actually say, in these cases, you don't have age-related macular degeneration, we think you have one of these genetic rare macular dystrophies. And then we're going to take a cohort that's been diagnosed with macular dystrophies and compare it to sort of your more clinical signs of age-related macular degeneration. We're going to compare the two conditions and try and figure out what clinical signs can we use to better differentiate the two conditions. And with that information, we're then hoping to be able to take that to clinicians so that every person with macular disease, when they go and see an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, they can get a better diagnosis and get the accurate diagnosis for their condition. So when I mentioned that the two conditions have different genetic causes, that's a big contributor to the difference between the two conditions. So even though rarer macular dystrophies normally affect people younger in life, it can affect people of all ages, and that's something that as clinicians we sometimes forget. And so for someone with a macular dystrophy, their condition is inherited through a single gene through their family. So even though they might not have any other family members affected with the same condition, they could pass it on to their children and their grandchildren. And sometimes these conditions can skip a generation as well. So it might not be discovered until later. So for us, it's important that people are diagnosed correctly so that they can be counseled correctly, so that their children and their grandchildren know about their risks accurately as well. But also another really important factor for us is that people can then go and receive the right treatments or be considered for the right treatments for their condition, because the genetic treatments that are now being developed for these macular dystrophies are different than the ones that are being developed for age-related macular degeneration. And that's because they have very different disease causes and so need different treatments. At the moment, I'm a research fellow at the University of Melbourne. I was trained as an optometrist, so I've been in clinical practice for almost 10 years now. So I've worked with a lot of people with low vision and a lot of people with all different eye diseases, including macular diseases. I worked in private practice for a few years, and then I decided to undertake a PhD. Now I've had a windy journey in research, so my PhD, I spent a lot of time working with people with diabetes, but I also did a lot of research into nutrition, so effects of nutrition and what we eat on our eye health. And so I did a lot of work in omega-3 fatty acids, and also eating polyunsaturated fatty acids and how that affects eye health. And that's when I first started working in macular diseases. And then after I finished my PhD, I'm now doing what's called a postdoc. So I'm a research fellow in inherited retinal diseases. And so my main interest now is thinking about how different genes contribute to eye disease and why they cause different eye diseases. And so I've gone around a long way and I'm back in macular diseases again. It's been very hard for us to find funding for a project like this because we know that for this project, genetic testing is fundamental. We need to be able to do genetic testing to be able to diagnose the rare macular dystrophies from age-related macular degeneration. It is actually the only way to confirm it, but it's tricky because genetic testing is actually quite expensive and it requires a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of skills. And so it means that we can only start the project from quite small. We start with a small group and we do genetic testing in a small group, and then in the future we will then look to expand this project further as we start to learn more about the differences between the two conditions. And so finding funding for a small project can be very, very difficult because we're not working with a whole bunch of people, with thousands and thousands of people. We're starting with 10 and then 20 and then 30, and we're growing from there. So it can be very, very hard, but we're very, very excited to start this project. So Faye, Ronald, and all of the other donors that have donated to Macular Disease Foundation Australia, I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity that you have given us to do our research. For young researchers like me, finding funding can be really, really difficult. And so without your support, without this funding, ideas would stay as ideas in our heads. They will never get turned into projects or findings or answers. And so it really is thanks to you that we're able to now investigate these ideas and hopefully turn them into new answers. So I'm very, very grateful for this gift that you've given us. And we can't wait to share our findings with you in the future.